Yo, what's up, and welcome back to the Social Primate podcast. Thank you guys for tuning back in. Today we have Jose Chavez, the host of the Awkwardly Social podcast and comedian.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, man, we were just talking about how long it took you to come out here from San Fernando Valley.
It was a bit of a drive. It wasn't terrible. I'll say this much. I like driving. I like long drives. I like getting lost in thought and just listening to music, doing your own like karaoke in the car.
Yeah.
So that wasn't a big deal. My only concern was because we had not met in person. As soon as I exited the freeway, I passed like a lot of inactive train tracks.
Yep.
Like it just more and more train tracks. It was getting more progressively ominous. I passed through like these old buildings that look like it's when you pass through the areas where it's just pure industry, like industrial buildings. I passed all that to get to this one street, and I pull up in the front, and I was like, I think I might be on my way to get murdered. That was my only concern. I was like, I think I'm gonna get murdered right now.
Yeah, it definitely looks a little, once you cross a certain part of the freeway, you're gonna start wondering like, what the fuck you're at, and it's like. So, San Fernando Valley, did you grow up around here in this general?
No, I grew up out there. I grew up in the valley.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you rarely come on to this Southeast LA area.
No, I've come out here for shows.
Yeah.
I've done some bar shows out here. I've done I have a couple of friends that kind of live out in this area. Mm. But I don't really come out this way. The last time I was out here, though, was I was just thinking about this on my drive over. I was like, all of this looks so familiar to me. And I realized the reason for that is a few blocks over, when I was looking for a car, I went on that OfferUp or whatever it is. Yeah. Somebody had posted this vehicle. I honestly can't remember what it was called. It was one of those like oval-shaped ones that were really popular for a while. I'm trying to remember. It wasn't quite an SUV.
Like a van?
No, it wasn't a van. It wasn't as big as a van. It was more of a. It's gonna bother me.
Fuck, is it what brand was the car? Chevrolet?
No, Jesus. That's the problem is that I can't remember what brand it was. I know if I knew the brand, I would immediately be able to say, oh, it's a yada yada. It was like a PT Cruiser.
PT Cruiser.
There you go. So it's a PT Cruiser.
That is a brand.
And
a Fiat.
Yeah,
one of these guys, right?
Yeah, one of those, and purple. And what's crazy about this? These motherfuckers were selling it on there. And they were so shady about the paperwork. They're like, well, we can sell you the car right now. We won't be able to get you the title to it right away. But we'll be able to get it to you in a week because they're like, oh, no, this was our friend's car. Yeah. And we realized the license plate had another state on it. So we were like, oh, can we see the person who owns this car? Like, oh, he's not here right now. So I'm pretty sure they were trying to sell me a stolen car.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then the car looked, and it was in pretty shitty condition for the amount of money that they were asking for. And then they lowered it a lot. Their asking price. That's when I was like, yeah, for sure, this is
that's
stolen
a red
car.
flag.
Yeah, there were so many red flags about it.
It went from 2,000. Oh, give me $20.
Yeah,
give me $20 for it.
I think they got down to like about 700. I was like, that is way too low for this vehicle.
Yeah.
Even if in its current condition. And then if it turns on, it's already valued at more than what you're selling it for.
Right. And then you get in the car and drive off, and then they're like, pull you over.
Yeah, they're like, we'll just hold on to all your credit cards and your social.
You say you came to see that car around here?
Yeah, it was right around here. That's why I looked. I remember the same. I remember the same ominous train tracks.
Yeah,
like on my way over, I was like, Jesus.
No, yeah, I get what you're saying. Last time I was driving on the freeway and I was in the car with my kid and I was like, dude, we're reaching Mexico. Mm-hmm. And he starts looking around. He starts panicking, like, "No, I want to go back." It's like, well, you can kind of get that vibe, from here and there. Not a bad thing, but it's.
And then you hit Pacific, and then it's over.
I mean, you do literally cross the wrong side of the tracks. It's a very literal sense. Although I'll be honest with you, when I walked in here, so I come up to the front, and it's like. It's quiet. There's I see you had like a security system here, so I was like, okay, so at least they're looking out for themselves. But at the same time, I was like, wait, what if this is how they keep their prisoners inside? And then this motherfucker comes around the corner and he's like, hey, why don't you come to the back? I was like, oh, okay, cool, where the security cameras aren't. Okay, and I come in here and it's like this beautiful setup. It's like a nerd dream come true. There's beautiful artwork and comic book themed stuff all over me. A wall of pop vinyls right behind me. I mean, this is a pretty good setup.
Trust me, man. If you would have gone to the last studio I was in Southgate, it's probably like 10 minutes from here.
Yeah.
You would have thought you were walking into like some hostile.
It's always
Hannibal
like
Lecter
that.
Place.
Podcasts, I feel like they're starting to thrive in like the most like is like when you first walk in, every person thinks I'm gonna get sold, like somebody's gonna like kidnap me, and I'm now gonna work for someone else. It's had that feeling. I didn't feel comfortable. This is how you know that you can easily kidnap me, because as soon as I saw all the nerd stuff, I let my guard down completely. I was just like, oh, this is fun. Yeah, exactly. You just hand me a lollipop, and I'm just like,
hey, and a Game Boy. Here you go.
It's like, what are you doing? Why are you putting on your pants? What is that, Pac-Man? I just move on.
Yeah, man. I mean, again, like you said, like podcasts in general, or anytime you come into like an interview, air quotes, or say, there's already that awkwardness between the person if you don't know them,
Yeah.
Like I was thinking too, like, fuck, like, you start thinking like, what am I gonna talk about? Like, especially with somebody you don't necessarily know, and then you kind of go on a rabbit hole from that, But once you kind of let your guard down a little bit, you kind of get into the mood and stuff. So
it's totally fine. And I get it, because when I have people on my podcast, when they have me over to their house, because I record either out of my living room or my stuff is portable, so I take it with me wherever I go. And then sometimes I will go and interview at someone's place. Like I did, I interviewed Brad Williams at his home.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And when I got there, his dog immediately started barking at me. And I'm not scared of dogs, so I was just very immediately approaching it. And he has a pit bull, and so I was petting the dog, and the dog was so excited to see me that it fell backwards. It landed on its back. It just got too excited. So I walk in, and it's him, his lovely wife, and his dog. And I'm sitting there. I'm like, oh, this is a really nice place. It's a little uncomfortable because I respect this guy so much as a comedian, and it's like somebody I look up to, even though he's about maybe a couple years younger than I am. But the point is that like I look up to this dude.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, this is a little nerve wracking, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I don't know what to do, but at the same time, it's like I could tell that he was a little apprehensive about me. Like I'm walking in there with like just my backpack of shit, looking the way that I do, and I understand that like I'm not the most friendly looking guy at times. So he just had this look of like, oh, okay, well, we're doing this thing. And then he had a little knife out on the table or whatever. I'm like, this dude's ready to defend himself if he has to.
Yeah, he's ready to lunge with that.
Yeah, and I was like, plus he has a pit bull, so it's like, what am I gonna do? Punch it? No, but that dog was so sweet. That dog was so affectionate. I loved it very much. But I understand that coming from the producing and hosting of it, how hard it is. That's why when I agreed to do this podcast, I was like, you know what? I always expect people to have faith in me. Why shouldn't I do the same for other people?
Right.
So you're welcome.
Man, well, thanks again, man. Basically that's us to start off. That's Jose Chavez in a small nutshell. Just a little part of you.
Very much, yeah. It's pretty much all I am. Is just a bunch of awkwardness and then trying to figure out whether or not my life is in danger. So that's how I roll.
So how did your podcast come about, man?
Honestly, I've always been. The best way I can put it is I've always had headphones on. Mm-hmm. I was always listening to music. I was very much into like early hip hop, but it was very early in the 2000s where when I started working doing security, I would listen to the Kevin and Bean show on K-Rock.
Of course.
And so when the music would start after they're talking, I realized I'm like, oh, I'm kind of more interested in the humor and the conversation. Mm-hmm. When they started putting their podcast on their show on podcast, that's the first podcast I ever listened to, and this was back before iPhones. This was when it was just the iPods. So I uploaded it on there, and then I discovered that there was more things, and I always talked about for like the next 5 years, like I want to do a podcast sometime. I had been on a guest on a couple of them early on. I was terrible at it. I hadn't quite figured out my voice yet because I just started doing comedy, and then I started doing this one with a buddy of mine who kind of lives out this way, and he was telling me about it. He's like, you got to put something together. So he asked me a bunch of questions about myself, like what's the thing that stands out about me. I'm like, I don't know, I'm awkward, I know that much. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, well, expand on that. And I was like, socially awkward. Okay, well, how about I do awkwardly social, or whatever, because I still like to socialize, but I'm not very good at it.
Yeah.
And I get anxiety, so this is a good way of having a one-on-one conversation. And I started it, and it was fun at first. I would have a weird guest because I had my buddy Steven co-host with me occasionally, and we had on like this guy who was convinced he was a vampire, and he drank blood. He drank blood on my podcast.
He was really convinced?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Well, he was like, it was like a state of mind for him. Like he didn't think that he would turn into a bat and all that stuff. He thought it was in a very grounded in this world of reality, but still a vampire. And then he would drink. He literally my buddy Steven brought his friend who drew some blood from him, and then the guy drank it.
Oh
And
shit.
yeah, and
fuck.
that was weird. And then so there was like some kind of weird quirkiness like that.
Yeah.
I hopped on a bus with a audio recording, and interviewed people taking the bus, and that
Oh,
was
damn,
that was
dude.
that was kind of fun and weird. But it wasn't my voice. It wasn't it was just the things that I thought I needed to do to get listeners. And then when I took like a year off from podcasting, I said I got to figure out what it is people want to know, what it is I like talking about. And it occurred to me, like, just like this is your podcast, you can talk about whatever you want. Your conversations could go wherever they go. If the person you're interviewing is a little like apprehensive about it, doesn't want to talk about it, and you move on to something else, that's totally fine. But this podcast can be whatever you want it to be. That's the revelation I had. I said I can talk about whatever I want if it relates to me. If it loses people who would wouldn't have listened otherwise, that's totally fine, because I need to figure out who my audience is, and I need to bring them to me versus me going to them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And there's the audience is there.
Yeah.
They're just waiting to find the appropriate podcast to kind of follow.
Exactly. So everybody's hoping that there's one really awkward Hispanic dude with a lot of social anxiety, very monotone, and very dry humor. So I'm glad I'm able to fill that market.
Hey, man, that's perfect. Because honestly, that market is also pretty small.
Yeah, it is.
So I mean, there's a few other podcasts in this area for sure. But I feel like it's growing now. At least I was doing some other podcasts before too. So in that time frame, maybe like 5 years, I definitely have seen in this general area that start booming. So I think it's cool. It's cool that also people want to explore that.
Podcasts are becoming like the new underground thing.
Yeah.
Like check out your studio. This thing that's going on. This is your place, right?
Yeah.
So you got a great studio here, and
Thank you.
And it's very smart, because what you're doing is, first of all, I love that you have the Onnit brand behind you. I'm an Onnit person as well. Alpha Brain, big fan of it. So here's the thing. When you set up something like this, you are allowing the world to come to you, and you're going to the world audibly. And that's fucking dope. But at the same time, it's becoming easier and easier to do something. Like, this is a great setup that you have right here. I love this.
Thank you.
My shit's out of my backpack. It's easy to get around to.
What do you use?
I use the H4n Zoom.
Okay. That's a
I use
classic.
a couple of XLRs, a couple of mics, and then a little headphone splitter, so I can get audio to 2 speakers. If I need to add more people, then I just add a mixer in and bring some extra cables with me, depending on how I end up setting up the situation. So it's always good, but it's like I wanted to at some point do something like this and build a network out of it. And it's always something that I'm talking about doing, but I haven't quite I don't have the space for it. That's I think my biggest issue is that I don't have the space for it. But I think if I brought all my shit out of storage, I'd be able to decorate the walls like this and do all this shit.
Yeah, make it look pimp.
Yeah, but it's the underground thing. It brings up it brings out the people who have a voice. I've always believed that everyone has a story to tell. Not everyone's a great storyteller, but everyone has the ability to at least share a fascinating story. I'm sure you have a great story with how you set this up, or how you got to this point, how you started collecting all these things, how you decided to get into podcasting. There's all these different things that inspire people somewhere down the line, and it just becomes this, like, you just pile on all these experiences to get where you are right now. And a lot of people can't rap, a lot of people can't sing, but they still want to spread their message through the way that you do, through something like that. And this is a great medium for it. This is like a very easy and understandable and easily producible medium, and it just takes it to another level to be a great producer, to make something else like this. You know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for sure he's selling the idea here. People come in here, you're gonna, I don't know, I leave here and I feel pretty good about myself. Like, fuck, it feels like I did something.
Yeah.
I mean, not that I don't, but there's just a different environment.
Not that I don't. I mean, I'm a shitty person when I get out of here.
Yeah.
But no, here's the other thing. This is something that I tell people all the time, especially comics, when they're having a tough time, like self-doubting themselves, which is super easy to do. It's easy for me to walk out of here and be like, I don't have anything to show for. But that's because what we do is so immediate. There's no physical product. There's no physical thing that you can hold. If you could say, I produced this podcast, and hold it, then you'll be able to say, okay, I made this. But because there isn't a physical thing to do, it's hard for you to see it. It's, you would have to look at the statistics, and the statistics could be heartbreaking because they're not always accurate. And then you find out that people listen to it, and then you find out this and that. Like, I've done shows recently where I was like feeling really shitty about whether or not I should continue the podcast. People come up to me and they're like, dude, I it's really weird talking to you because I feel like I know you. I'm like, oh, really? Why is that? They're like, well, we listened to your podcast. I'm like, holy shit, there's somebody out there listening.
Yeah, dude,
but it's like, so you feel like all the money, all the time and energy you're investing into something because you don't see the results for it immediately, and it's a long-term investment. Everything is a long-term investment, and that's one of the hardest things to do when it comes to our kind of industries, is to see that because you don't have a physical product for your investment. You feel like, did I do something? And we did. I mean, I drove out here. Hopefully, this results in more people checking out my comedy, my live shows, or my podcast, because, I do stand-up as well.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, if you guys are going to be at the Ice House Pasadena, April 11th, 8:30 p.m., go to icehousecomedy.com. You can check out the Awkwardly Social Comedy Show, produced and hosted by Jose Chavez. Getting back to it now.
So you
Mile break.
You produce and host that comedy show at the Ice House?
Yeah, so I produce it at a lot of different places, but it's usually local comedy clubs around here. The Ice House, the Haha. I used to do it over. I try to get it going at the Improv, but that one's a little bit harder to do. But I've been able to do shows there, just not the ones that I self-produce. But the one that I'm doing right now is going to be at the Ice House April 11th. And it bounces around. I actually used to call the shows Comedy con Carne, because when I first produced my shows, I used to do like a backyard barbecue show, and that's why I would call it that. And then I would work at this terrible comedy club that they wanted they needed you to have a gimmick, and they needed you to be like, oh, you're Hispanic, why don't you make a Latino show? I'm like, nah, I'm good. I'm just going to produce a show. And then so I gave it that title so they would feel like they're getting a Latino show, even though they really weren't. There'd be some Hispanic comics, but it wasn't the focus of it. And then when I finally came up with the podcast, that's when I rebranded my shows to be by the same name of Awkwardly Social. Yeah. So now I have the Awkwardly Social live comedy shows and the Awkwardly Social podcast.
Dude, well, that's awesome. I wanted to get into your comedian part, your comedian part. Your what am I trying to say?
Comedy.
Your stand-up. Your
Okay.
stand-up. You know what I mean.
I'm
getting awkward
He's
now.
getting awkward.
Yeah.
Hey man, it happens sometimes.
No, I'm just kidding.
No, but talking about that, like, how did that get? I mean, so that was your influence to start the podcast. Like, was that something that you always wanted to kind of lean towards, like just comedy?
I mean, here's what I'll say. I think a part of me always wanted to be a stand-up comic, just because when you watch, like, when you leave a movie theater, you just finish watching Rocky, you're like, holy shit, I want to be a boxer.
Yeah,
or something
you're all
like that.
motivated.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. You have this fuck yeah energy, and then I think I would watch a lot of stand-up and be like, I want to do that someday. I want to be able to tell jokes like that someday, because off stage, I'm a pretty funny guy in terms of like the random shit that I say, but I do a lot of things. I would always, like, whenever a situation would be stressful, I would always try to, like, almost like a defense mechanism, use comedy to lighten the mood, to try to make things better, especially because my family had a lot of drama going on. Yeah. And then as I got older, I realized that a lot of the drama wasn't necessary, and we just needed a different perspective. So I leaned a lot on comedy. When I got laid off, I was looking for something to do, and I needed to figure out things in my personal life. I decided, you know what, I'm going to start writing scripts, because when I was living with these roommates who were all film students, I would write a lot of scripts, and I always loved that. It was very therapeutic, but at the same time triggered my imagination a lot, and brought it back to where I was when I was a kid, because everybody as a kid has like something creative about them. They write, they draw, whatever.
Right.
I did all of that shit, including poetry. Nice. So when I decided to try comedy, I got hooked on it. I got stuck on it. I was like, you know what, this is I gotta chase that high. I kept going back for it, and then I went from wanting to someday be a writer to just being like, you know what, fuck that. There's more immediacy in it, and I don't have the patience for writing. Yeah. So stand-up comedy is a good thing, because if I think of something, I could do it on stage later on that night. Like if I want to figure out something, it's like I could do it so immediate, and I get the immediate response that I understand where things are going, and then I just stuck with it. It was just like I had a really good set the first time, didn't end as well as I wanted it to, and I wanted to recreate that experience, and I just keep doing so. And now it's like I can't remember the first time going up. I remember the moments. I remember being up there, but I've had so many great experiences since then that, like, I no longer feel like, now I just feel like, let's have fun with this shit. Yeah. Let's go up there and let's do it. And that's a hard thing, because a lot of sometimes you see shit. Do you know any comics? Like, I don't know how you and I personally know each other. I'm assuming we're associated with someone.
Yeah, I think something came across. I think Vaya con Diosa.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did her podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So I had her on the podcast like last year.
Okay.
So I think I saw her, and then Instagram just follow this specific page.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like browsing, and I was like, oh.
Okay, so you were creeping on me. Okay, I get it.
Okay, man.
No, but
Did he slide in your DMs?
I did.
He did slide in the DMs.
I was like, I didn't even know how, but he managed to poke me on Instagram. It was a trip. No, but
Eggplant.
but it's if you hang out with comics enough, eventually they get a little cynical. And I was like, I gotta try to keep my shit as lighthearted, because I am a person that, like, I'm open about my depression, I'm open about my anxiety, but at the same time, I firmly believe that people can find a happiness, or they can still enjoy themselves. Like, you don't have to jump to cynicism just because shit's a little fucked up. Like, you can allow yourself to be to have fun, and just at the very core of something, just enjoy it, with not question, not have to judge it, not just be like, okay, I'm having fun right now, but don't forget the world's fucked up. I'm like, just, I don't know, just for like a minute, there's nothing wrong with just for a moment of
just
like
enjoying that,
exactly, appreciating something, because
little
that's
nugget.
that's our job. That's my job. It's like when I'm on the clock when it comes time to make people feel better. You're on the clock when you're giving somebody some content to listen to. You're on the clock when you're doing this stuff with us. I assume that you host other podcasts as well. Like, are you on them and you talk on them as well?
Yeah.
Right.
They don't like when I talk, but I do.
Go for it. Who the fuck gives a shit? I mean, if it's they're using your network.
I've actually been asked not to talk on 3 of
really?
the shows I've been.
Damn.
Hey, I've said some pretty appropriate things.
Here's what I'll say. Do they pay you for it?
It's studio fees, but it's not outrageous.
Oh no, I know that, but I'll say this.
It's like a donation to help the studio out.
Well, I'll say this much. I think that if there's an agreed upon terms where they say, you know what, this conversation is this flow right here, you might throw it off a little bit, but they're paying you for it. I would say in those instances, yeah, for sure, like whatever, let them do their thing. That's fine. But if they're not paying you, or if you're being really dope with them, they're being a friend. It's like, what's wrong with you chiming in? So far, you haven't done anything annoying.
I wouldn't want to I would not to interrupt, but I know what you're saying. But this is more like I have these resources and I like to help people out and share with them, so it's like a collective. But I don't like to like ruin people's shows or like throw off the whole balance, because I know he has like a thing that he wants to do, and I don't want to like, not you specifically, but anybody. Not that you told me not to talk on your shows. It's other shows.
Nah, I haven't told him yet.
Not yet. Yeah. I know. Go.
No, but I personally think that every now and then you need a little wild card in there.
Hey man, if you need a wild card, I'll give you the wild card.
Okay, we'll keep them to a minimum.
No. I think we should dial it back a little bit. He's getting a little too confident now. Just dial him back a little.
So I was eating ass. No,
I was gonna bring up so like that jump. Like you brought up, like you feel like when you made that jump to deciding you were going to do stand-up comedy, since you've been open about, you mentioned your depression and anxiety, how was that jump from being, I will assume there was a like introvertness, within you at first, but then you had to make the jump to be in front of a crowd of people and fucking talk, make them laugh, with the pressure of having to entertain them per se.
You know what? I'll say this right now. I have no problem with being on stage because it's easier. Like if you've listened to my podcast or heard me on other podcasts, you might have heard me say this, but there's this thing that I refer to as social double dutch. If there's 2 people talking and I try to jump in on the conversation, that's hard for me, because when people are talking, they develop a pattern, a pacing to their conversation. I don't want to jump in too early or too late, because then I'll throw their shit off. So it's very hard for me to do that. It's very difficult. If a one-on-one like this would work very well for me, even something like this, because he's chiming in at this point. You and I are the focus of the conversation, and he's just kind of bringing in his commentary and stuff like that. If you two are the ones having the conversation, then I would have a little bit of a harder time. When I'm on stage, I'm the guy with the microphone. I'm the guy who's the focal point of the conversation, so I can say the things that I think. If people start talking to me while I'm on stage, I have the ability to to shut them up or to engage with them in a conversation, depending on where this is going. It's easy for me to do that. I've been fortunate enough to do comedy in front of anywhere from dozens or even less than that, in the audience, to hundreds or even more than that. But it's like and that's a great experience. I love it, and I don't have a hard time with doing that. But I do. I was trying to figure out what the hell that crunchy sound is. It's your wax thingy.
Hey, well, let me tell you, if you're an asshole, you could do all that stuff you do on stage in real life. Just walk up to people's conversations and be like, hey, yo, what's going on? Have people walk away from the conversation. It's real easy. I have had that. It's real easy.
That's the thing, is that I did. That's when I learned that the reason I'm good for comedy is because I used to go out to people and I used to just start talking and stuff. Like I don't have a problem approaching people. I don't have a problem talking with people. It's just that sometimes I need to observe, like, a lot of times my sisters used to tell people, be like, what's wrong with your brother? I'm like, oh, don't worry. He once he opens up, he won't stop talking. And it's true, because I used to have to study a room, an environment, people to understand their kind of humor. Because if I don't, when I start talking to people just out of nowhere, I say the weirdest, funniest shit because I'm more entertained by myself. And then people walk away from me. Like I have specific memories where like I'm walking, like I sat down, like there's a group of guys I made friends with a couple of them, and I go and I sit down and start talking to them, and then I'm saying shit, they're laughing for a couple minutes, and then they're like, all right guys, well we're gonna get out of here, and then they all just leave me and they don't invite me to join with them, and I'm just like, okay guys, see you, and I'm just like whatever, and I go back to my own thing. And like I always thought that I was the expression introverted extrovert.
Yep.
So that's essentially what the category I fall under. I don't mind socializing with people. I just have a tough time with it. But I also need the ability to I like being a recluse. I like spending 90% of the day with myself and spending the rest of it with other people. I can't spend all day with people. That's frustrating. I can't spend all day by myself. That it makes you go fucking crazy. And the person that can convince you the most of your nature, of the things that you hate about yourself is yourself. So if you spend all your time with yourself, you're gonna go fucking bananas. So I try to make sure that I spend most of the time by myself, reflecting, thinking, being creative, or being whatever, and then spend just a small portion towards the end of the day, which is why comedy works out so beautifully for me. It's like I don't have to do any of this until the sun goes down. That's when I fucking come alive.
Yeah. That's when you start getting that life energy.
That's when I start becoming stronger. Like just lightning strikes and I start flexing
Ultra
muscles.
Beast.
Yeah, I didn't know there's muscles I didn't know I have and shit.
Yeah.
Like, holy fuck.
Man, talking about your comedy, man. So like, I don't know how far you follow like current event stuff, but I think like a few months ago, Disney fired James Gunn, for some inappropriate jokes and stuff. Right now, he got rehired and all that stuff. And there's been other cases with people, comedians per se, like, what was his fucking name?
What did you say, Louis C.K.?
Yeah, Louis C.K. Let's say, who was it? There was another one recently. What's his name?
Hardwick?
Hardwick? Oh, yeah,
Hardwick?
Chris Hardwick. A few examples per se, Like these jokes, they've been in a sense restricted, not only because of the position or the entertainment places that they work in, but as a comedian, have you found it difficult to kind of navigate those waters in between what you could say and what you shouldn't say, or you could say, basically?
Not as a comic, not even as necessarily a man. So I'll say this much.
Yeah.
I don't like I'll tell you a quick story. When I was a kid, my mom and I were walking out of a grocery store, and then she was upset with me, and I didn't understand why. And then she was like, it's really rude of you when you don't offer to carry the bag. And I was like, well, I didn't know I was supposed to offer that. I didn't know that was a thing. So I didn't know that it was an issue until someone addressed it. So from then on, I always carried the bags, and I never questioned it. And that's not because I didn't want to prior to that. It's just that I didn't immediately go to that. Now, when it comes to the kinds of things that comics are being accused of, things that they do, like it never occurred to me that somebody would just masturbate in front of somebody like that, or be an asshole, or try to be controlling and all, because that's not in my like wheelhouse. I'm always surprised by that, even though I grew up in a purely women household aside from myself. Like I still I didn't know or learn a lot of that kind of behavior until I got older. So when I see stuff like Louis C.K. disappearing and coming back and then doing this comedy and stuff like that, I'm no longer surprised. I just don't understand how it happens. Like I don't understand what triggered it. I can't really speak on any of it because it's like it's cyclical. If you do something bad, I've heard stories of lesser known comics who will be somebody's fucking friend, and then they'll use that excuse of I was drunk to fucking just be a shitty human in that moment. Exactly. And then and then they get blackballed for like 5 minutes, and then they come back quieter and stuff like that. And it happens on multiple levels. There's comics who who recently where I found out shit about them where I'm like, holy fuck, that's crazy. I'd rather not name names because I don't know.
Yeah, of course.
But put it out there. But it's like, there's one guy who got in trouble for grabbing a woman and talking shit about her on stage, being upset that she was a lesbian, being like, oh, what a waste, like shit like that. So it's like, so they think, so there's people who do things on different levels, and it's never like I don't do humor that's like, so anyway, I saw this chick and I was like, man, I want to grab her breast. Like I'm never that guy to begin with, so I would have no problem with that kind of situation. I think sometimes I have a tough time with like I don't know if I'm being offensive, so I'll play it safe because that's like I don't need to be. Nobody needs to be. You don't have to be offensive. If you're doing offensiveness and you're like, you know what, I can be offensive if I want. I don't give a shit. You're just being a dick. Like there's nothing that requires you to do one thing or other. Comedy isn't about being offensive.
Yeah.
Comedy is about being raw. It's about being open. And if your thing is to be like, you know what, I'm going to test the waters by saying the most heinous things, what you're saying is you're just an asshole who finally has the freedom of like doing it. It's like you don't have to. You know, you could be a gentleman. You're not required to be anything else. And if your instinct isn't to just be kind to others, I'm probably not going to associate with you, and that's not going to be a part of who I am. So I don't know. I've never had a problem with this stuff, but I understand where the problem comes from now.
Do you think at that point where somebody does decide to be offensive, that they should just kind of like take responsibility for what they kind of said? And I mean, since they're doing comedy in that sense, like,
I'll say this much: comedy is like what I say to you right now in this room is going to be on podcast platforms. It's going to be some kind of video network, I assume. Someone's going to see it somewhere, and they're going to, so I'm putting whatever I'm saying here will make it out there. When you're doing comedy, you're kind of trusting that it's going to stay in that room, that it's going to stay there because they're not filming it. Unless the comic on stage is filming it with the intention of releasing it later. It's usually where somebody can just be super vulgar and vulnerable and have fun with it. I don't think somebody needs to be not offensive. Like there's like Kill Tony and stuff like that.
Yeah,
like
right.
Tony Hinchcliffe's like he's an asshole, but he's not like he's not an evil person. He's just an asshole. But that's his thing, and that's fine. I get it. That's his thing. He can do that. But if he goes around his day to day, not on stage, just being a terrible human being, that's when you need to be concerned, Like, and also the person you should also be concerned about is a person who really goes out of his way to be like, I'm not a terrible person. I'm not a shady person. I just had I don't know. Did you? I don't know if you listened to my podcast, but I just had
yeah, I think I listened to two of they had the same guest. It was a lady.
Ariel Washington.
Ariel Washington. Yeah, I think you had. Oh, I don't know what the fuck that is, but what the fuck? I closed your page.
I think you Googled something else.
Oh, Christ, there you go.
So Ariel is an occasional guest of mine. So we're talking. I see right here.
Yeah,
it says
that's the one.
Yeah. So there's a dude that hits her up, and he when she's like getting on the bus, and he's like telling her she's very beautiful. He likes women with curly hair, and then he offered her money, brought out a wad of cash to show her how much money he has, because he was trying to get her to do porn. And then he's like, not all men are bad guys. Like, don't worry, you can trust me, like that kind of shit. So it's like, that's the person you should be really concerned about if they're going out of their way to try to prove to you that they're not a bad person. It's like, look, don't be a bad person, and if people end up trusting you, people end up trusting you. Like, I say it sometimes, but I say it on stage for my joke. I don't I'm not walking around every day being like, get to know me. It's just something that I do on stage because it's comedic. Yeah. Because I understand what I look like. If you didn't see me, or if you didn't listen to me from a podcast, and I was walking down the street with my hair down and I was like focused and zoned out and like had a serious look on my face, like of scowl and shit, you would, you probably wouldn't trust me immediately. But in this context, in this environment, you know me, you trust me, you understand something about me. So like I always say, I forget what I look like sometimes. Yeah. So I've had women run away from me. I just have to accept that that's what it is. So I'm just like, no, it is what it is.
The example of the comedian was Kevin Hart. So I think he said some homophobic jokes like a few years back.
Oh yeah.
And now it came back to him, and after he had apologized. Yeah, the Oscars. Not that I don't give a fuck about those things, but I just read them and I take into context what's going on, type of thing, and like the culture of it, and that culture being that at the fact that even you say something, sure you take responsibility for it. That's accepting what it was, but then still being held accountable after. Like at what point is there a line drawn in between? You can make a joke and then somebody takes it out of proportion, and then. Well,
I mean, no, he wasn't making a joke. He meant it. He meant what he was saying. I think somebody who said something similar to that was Tracy Morgan, talking about how if his son came out to be gay, he would kick his son's ass or whatever. So he would say stuff like that. So I would say that comes from a lot of. Some bigotry comes from lack of education, lack of understanding. There's also this machismo thing about it. I had a comic who recently unfollowed me on shit and on like disassociated themselves with me because I posted a photo of, I want to say, me and a fellow comic named Martin Rizzo. He and I were at Disneyland together, and we took one of those photos trying to be like, I forget what it was. It wasn't even like cutesy, but it was supposed to be like, you know how couples take photos in front of the castle kind of thing.
Yeah.
We did that. And then we put some kind of caption on there, and just acting like it was like we were a couple, or being something stupid like that.
Yeah.
So this comic unfollowed me because he is very machismo. He was like, oh, I fucking. He always says like, oh, if a gay dude tried to do something gay in front of me, I'd kick his ass or something like that. Like he would say that kind of thing. And a lot of it comes from a history of machismo, of misunderstanding, of not fully knowing what something is, and it was a culture that was sort of frowned upon or closeted and stuff, and it was restricted. So there's people from earlier generations, not that long ago. Like you think like somebody who's 5 years older than us lived in a very different world than we do.
Sure.
I don't know how old you are, but I'm 35.
I'm 29.
Like, okay, so like in high school there was a I can't say, to have a tough time because I can't say that they were necessarily transgendered, but he was he would wear women's clothing, but he wouldn't do it like he wasn't wearing like the way that RuPaul would in terms of like heavy makeup and dresses and stuff like that. It was more just like female cut clothing and pants and yada yada, and would be ridiculed, and people would be just terrible to him because he didn't identify as a woman. This is just the way he dressed, and this is what made him feel comfortable. And he was a gay man, but he was, like he didn't quite come out as saying because he didn't have the name for it, but he didn't go by as a, some people would say cross-dresser, some people would say transgendered or a drag queen or whatever. But it was somewhere along the lines of all that, and that was when I was in high school, and it was just terrible. People were just dicks to this guy, and then he graduated I think like a year or two before me, and then I assume that things have gotten much better since then, now that people are older and sort of more open to stuff like that. Right. But when a comic says something like that, he doesn't know any better. Like, you don't know that you're being offensive. When my godson is half Filipino, and then his biological his Hispanic grandfather gave him a nickname that he didn't realize was offensive because he didn't mean it in any kind of like offensive way. But like Spanish culture, like when your grandma or somebody is referring to an Asian person, they say like chinito, whether or not they're Chinese. Like they'll say that. And it was kind of something along the lines of that, like not knowing that it's offensive. You learn over time that it's like, oh, the things that we're used to saying, maybe we've been saying it wrong the whole time because nobody really felt confident or comfortable with letting us know, hey, maybe not saying things like that so much. So I would say that that's 100% how he felt. If he's gotten any better or learned anything different, that's fine. If not, we can't hold it against him. You understand where culturally they were coming from prior to that, and it's still something we're learning. I mean, shit, think of it this way. Eddie Murphy in the 80s, when he did his fucking stand-up comedy, I want to say it was Raw, he talked about how you would get AIDS from kissing a gay man, because he didn't know. And then, and that was his joke, and the audience loved it, and they ate that shit up. Do you think Eddie Murphy's proud of that shit now?
Hell yeah. He called the first two guys in the front row to faggots, remember?
Yeah, what's I'm saying is he's definitely not proud of that now.
Oh, no.
There's no way.
When you said the audience ate it up, I was like, yeah, they loved it.
No, they loved it. They loved it. They loved that he said that. They loved that he did it. And now Eddie Murphy now would be like, well, I was a stupid 19-year-old kid, because I think he was 19 when he did that special. So he was young as fuck, and and back then people fucking ate that shit up. So it's like he had no motivation to change. If he had put that special out today, people would be like, dude, what the fuck's wrong with you? All this shit is offensive. He would have to come out and apologize. He'd have to change his shit, and he'd have to be a very different comedian today. Although he is he is a different person now, but that's just because he's living in a fucking mansion getting high all day. Oh yeah, for sure. Like he has nothing to worry about. He's done.
Yeah, exactly. His bills are being taken care of.
He doesn't have to work a day in his life if he doesn't want.
I mean, he does, because he has 20 kids, but that's a side note.
Yeah, but you know what? Even then, I don't think he has to work that much. Because think of it this way:
well, that's Shrek money.
Yeah, I mean, all the residuals that he's making, a lot of those kids and a lot of those kids are aging out. Once they hit 18, he's no longer responsible for them. There was this guy for a while who was claiming to be Eddie Murphy's son, like in the stand-up comedy community. And,
for real?
Yeah, and then I forget which comic asked Charlie Murphy about it, and Charlie Murphy was like, "That motherfucker's not Eddie Murphy's kid." Like, he's like, "That's not Eddie's kid," and he was just like, pissed. But I don't know if the guy's still around. Yeah. But there's some dude running around saying
Charlie Murphy's not around no more.
Well, no, I know that. I'm saying Eddie Murphy's the kid claiming to be Eddie Murphy's son.
Okay.
Yeah, this was before Charlie passed. This was on like last week.
No, I know.
Yeah. So it's but it's like whatever. I'm sure that kid's doing just fine.
Hey.
Yeah, I mean, with Eddie Murphy, with a Murphy last name, probably.
Yeah,
probably.
I'm gonna start claiming that I'm Eddie Murphy's kid.
It sucks as there's no honor in comedy because there's people who will take your whole act and do it if they could, you know.
There are. I mean, this comedian friend of mine who's I love this dude's comedy. His name's Nick Guerra. He recently posted that some female comic stole his material and did it in like the Spanish Comedy Central.
Yeah,
so
that's what I'm saying. It's one
like,
thing to have parallel thinking. It's another one to steal it verbatim, but just put it in a different language. That's the new thing.
Yeah, that's what I heard with like Carlos Mencia when it happened a few years ago or something.
No,
that was like a decade ago.
And it was, but there's people who are taking people's comedy acts and flipping it into a different language and doing it somewhere else.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah. Okay.
Carlos did steal jokes.
Yeah.
He openly admitted to that. But he just. What he did is he worked with like a lesser known comic and then stole their jokes and then did them on stage. And then, because the problem is that a lot of times with comedy, especially when it comes to like people who don't have honor, if you, the established comic, record that and then put it on TV before the aspiring comic gets it out there, suddenly you claim ownership to it, and people will believe that the Carlos Mencia versus the other guy, Ari Shafir, who I think he was one of the guys he stole
until
comedy
Redbad
from.
makes a video.
Yeah, and it was it got put out there. So it was that was a whole thing. So now he's been working with a comedy writer writing his own jokes and doing that kind of stuff. But now he has the money to be able to do that kind of stuff. Before he cut corners, and people do that shit all the time. I was doing a fundraiser with a guy who stole a Mitch Hedberg joke. Like he did, I was like, dude, Mitch Hedberg's one of the main reasons why I started doing stand up.
Yeah.
Like he was a comic where I was like, oh, I would be honored to work with this dude one day. Unfortunately, he passed long before I started doing stand up, but he was, like somebody who I looked up to. And so when I saw this fucking comic at a fundraiser use the I used to do drugs, I still do, but I used to too, or whatever. I was like, you fucking just stole one of his most famous jokes and fucking did it, and the crowd ate it up. I had to like clench my drink and turn to the guy who's the fundraiser was benefiting for and be like, I want to rip into this dude on stage. I so bad. I wanted to yell at him. I wanted to call him out, but I was like, I can't. This is a fundraiser. But I held on to that. And I was like, and if that dude ever hits me up for a spot, I'm going to call him out. Like, I was like, I will be respectful this one time. I haven't seen him in comedy since. I know he's around because I see him on flyers, but I'm not going to go out of my way to
go out there.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to approach him in person because if that was a one-time thing, that's fine. But if he does that shit multiple times, I'm going to have words with him.
No, I already know what his excuse is going to be. It was a benefit. I'm not gonna get my A material. You have a phone call.
I have a phone call?
Yeah.
Oh shit.
On the hotline. You want me to pick it up?
Oh fuck, let's do it. If it's something, if it's a hater, we'll hang up. And yo, who this be?
Yo.
Who is this? Announce yourself.
It's your neighborhood-friendly ghost, Fix, man.
Oh, damn. Dark Ghost Fix. That's one of the other guys from the VIP podcast. What's up, man?
Hell yeah. Bro, I'm watching this podcast. It's a really good episode.
Thanks, man. Thanks for tuning in. I'm hoping other people are watching it as well.
Now, I need to know the name of the comedian you have on. I'm sorry.
You want to introduce yourself, Jose? Yeah.
No, only because here's the problem is I don't know if he's done it more than that one time, and I don't want to blast his shit until I know. But trust me, what I say is, if I find out that he has done it more than once, you will see a post on like my social media. You'll see it on my Instagram. I will call that dude out. So I haven't heard stories of him doing it since, but if he does it again, I will be sure to like put it out there. Like I'm only being respectful right now because I'm going off of one experience from 2017. I assume it's been long enough. I haven't heard anything since. But if I hear that he does it again, I will put that dude on blast.
There you go.
I'll let you know so you can announce it later on.
I'll announce it later. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the messenger.
Another thing is, I heard Homeboy say that one of the people that inspired him was Mitch Hedberg.
Yeah.
That's fucking awesome, dude, because that was one of my favorite comedians. And it's crazy that you were able to notice when somebody stole one sentence from him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
Like when it comes to the punchline, you already recognize the cadence and all that. You know what I mean?
You're already clenching.
well, what's one of the great things about Mitch?
Was he
Hedberg
doing
is
the cadence too? Or just-
yeah, he did the cadence. He
Oh
did-
my God.
But for specifically for that joke, because the dude was like a Latino comic, so
Yeah.
it didn't quite fit in. So it obviously immediately stood out. But at the same time, I used to listen to Mitch Hedberg. Like I one time I got my CD stolen. The only CD they didn't steal was my Mitch Hedberg one that was still in the stereo, like put plugged in and shit. This is back when I was driving like a 2000 Honda Civic. So, but I would listen to his shit all the time, even if it wasn't stolen. I still would be fucking listening to his shit all the time. So I would listen to like Mitch all together and shit like that, and play it on loop. And I would also YouTube a lot of his stuff early on in the days. I saw his Comedy Central. I own his Comedy Central special. So there's two versions of it. There's a version that was on Comedy Central, and then there was the version of it, the unedited version, that's much longer. And he bombed so hard during his own special. So all the material that he wrote for the special, a lot of it did not land so well. So that he ended up doing his old shit, and his old shit fucking crushed it. So majority of his special is his old stuff. And that's not to say that his new stuff wasn't good. His new stuff was great, but it was a lot of times when you have these comedy specials, it's like, especially if it's a comic who's about to blow up, the audience isn't always a comedy audience. It's people who are like, you know,
like
who
fillers,
are,
kind
yeah,
of?
exactly.
Especially
Or
back
like there's a
then.
network and stuff. Like even now, like
Now?
yeah, I went to a friend's comedy special, a taping for Entre Nos for HBO Latino. And we were there, and the audience was like, they weren't a full comedy audience. So a lot of them were like supporters and stuff like that. But they fucking pieced out after like 2 hours because they wanted to record a second taping, and they left. So the second special, the last like half hour or whatever, had like a third of the audience.
Wow.
Because they didn't know. Like it's like, you know, there's always like a group of people that go to something like this, but they don't know. Like they're expecting the kind of show that they saw at the Ice House, but they don't know what a high production one is, because, you know, they have to go back and reshoot some things. Like this comic went up and didn't mess up their first take of their joke, but the audio wasn't right, so they were like, can you go back outside and do your introduction one more time? So they went back out and they did the exact same introduction, and the audience had to like pump up the energy, even though they thought it was funny.
Yeah.
They had to like do all this stuff. So
Nah, that's the old school way, and that's the wrong way to do comedy shows. You gotta do it the new way, how everybody's doing it. You pick 4 or 5 shows. It's multiple days. You do a show each time, and then you edit it from that. You know what I mean?
yeah, I mean, there's really no wrong way to do it.
Before I let you guys go, I need to ask you guys, best comedian podcast right now.
Best comedian podcast.
You mean like the ones we listen to?
Yes.
Let's take a look. Hold on. Let me bring out my phone real quick, because here's the thing. I have a lot of podcasts to recommend, and a lot of them aren't even established comics. Like there's if you ever want to listen to, like, there's Time with Nick and Johnny.
Well,
that's with Nick Guerra.
You gotta go with Danish and O'Neill podcast right there. Or if you could afford it, you gotta go Patreon Beach Cops.
You know what? How did this get
Is that
made?
Nick and Johnny with Johnny Roque?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
Joey
That dude's
Diaz,
gonna
the
be
Church
at
of
the
What's
Lexington
Happening.
soon,
Church
too.
too.
That's right here too.
That's
Look
a
at
good
that.
one.
Yeah. Okay. So here are my recommendations for podcasts. Which camera's closest to me? This one right here.
All of them.
Okay. So here's what I'll do.
You guys getting the sneak preview?
You guys see this? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so look, I've done that one. Armchair Expert with Dak Shepard. Surprisingly insightful for that
Oh,
one.
that's a good one.
That's me right there. You can ignore that. The Burtcast is great.
Oh yeah.
Blake in Review, that's a friend of mine that just kind of does review stuff, which is kind of entertaining. Conan O'Brien one is a lot of fun.
Yep.
Darren Carter's,
Yep.
the Doug Loves Movies. I was recently on the Facial Recognition podcast. That one's really dope. I really like that one. Getting Doug with High. Even though I don't
That's a good
smoke,
one,
I still find that podcast super entertaining. Let's see here. How did this get made? They review movies.
Oh yeah, how did this get made? It's fucking hilarious,
Yeah.
bro.
And then there's Ignorance is Blessed. I can recommend podcasts all day, all night. I mean, there's these.
What's your number one? What's your number one?
So they're
If
right
you
here.
could listen to it, like if
Social
it's one of those
Climbing,
ones, you know, like when you put a show on the TV and you don't even look at it, you just like to listen to it.
You know what?
What would be that podcast?
So it's right now it's a tie between Your Mom's House with Christina P and Tom Segura, and You Made It Weird with
Nice.
Pete Holmes, because Pete Holmes is so like. his conversations are so metaphorical that they really inspire a lot of deep thought, and they're also a lot of fun. So even though they're deep and serious, there's so much comedy underlining it and really coming through that's one where you're like, this motherfucker's making me think while making me laugh hard.
Yeah.
And
that's when you learn the best. That's when you take the information.
Also one that I'm a big fan of. It's called Awkwardly Social. It's with Jose Chavez. I recommend checking that one out.
I've definitely heard of that one. I don't know.
I heard he's handsome. That's all I know. It's
all right, man. Hey, Jose Chavez, thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you for calling, Fitz.
Eddie, Dre, I'll see you guys soon, man.
All right, man. Thank you.
You got it.
All right, later, bro.
One of the last questions I wanted to ask you, Jose, is like in regards to your material, do you feel like you pull that anywhere from your personal experiences often, or is it more about cultural?
Everything is personal. No, nothing really cultural. I was on a tangent earlier today because I have a tough time with culture. Yeah. Only because a lot of it is like I grew up. It's like you grow up in a ghetto, but it doesn't mean you grow up ghetto kind of thing. Yeah. So it's like I grew up in Pacoima, and people automatically assume I have a thug. It's like, sure, I may have a thicker skin or be less surprised when I hear a gunshot, but it doesn't mean that I'm a dude that's walking around with a fucking gun in my hand. You know, like I draw everything from experience, all personal. Sometimes I'll share stories that involve a lot of other people, but only if it directly impacts or reflects on me. Like I won't go talking shit about other people, but I will tell the story, that's about them if it also has to do with me. Right. But everything I talk about on stage is personal, awkward, and entertaining. It's mostly self-deprecating, but sometimes I will fuck with the audience and make fun of them live. Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah, that's cool, man. Yeah. I had a fucking question lined up and I kind of forgot.
Sorry, I give long answers.
It's my fault too. I have a short attention span. Fucking weed does that to you, man. Yeah. But the real question was, in the meantime, what's your plug?
My plug? Oh, wait, sure. Are we wrapping this up, or
We're close. We have 9 minutes to go. Yeah, but
gotcha.
While I'm trying to remember my fucking question.
Sure. Well, I'll plug my stuff real quick. Yeah, go for it. I have a podcast. It's called Awkwardly Social. You can get it iTunes or Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play. Just look for Awkwardly Social. If you hear four guys talking, that's just another show by the same name out of some guys in Texas, and ignore them. If you hear my voice, then you know that you're listening to the right one. If you hop on iTunes, give me a 5-star review, leave some ratings, whatever. Let me know what you think. I really appreciate feedback. I also like to put it out there that I encourage people to try their own thing, create their own content, start their own podcast. If you do, send it my way so I could check it out. I love listening to them. It's sometimes I listen to people who have like 3 followers and shit like that, and it doesn't matter to me. So long as it's good content, I will give it a listen. I won't be a hardcore fan all the time, but I'll at least check it out. awkwardlysocialcomedy.com. That's where you go if you want to find like the old episodes, information on upcoming shows, which I should be updating more often than I do. If you want to catch me live, I'm doing the Ice House Comedy Club in Pasadena on April 11th, 8:30 p.m. You can get the tickets at awkwardlysocialcomedy.com or icehousecomedy.com. Let's take a look here. I don't know. Just reach out to me if you have an awkward story to share. Some people reach out to me for advice for things. So they'll do. So sometimes I'll give advice. I used to put it out there a lot, but I stopped doing it because people would be like, "Don't put this on the podcast," but I need your advice on this thing. So I was like, you know what? If I'm just going to be answering you privately, I'm just not going to talk about it anymore. Yeah. So a lot of things would be like, "Don't use my name. Don't tell the story," because they'll know that I'm talking about them. I'm like, well, then why the fuck? Oh, so anyhow. But yeah, reach out, share some stories. Follow me on Instagram and stuff at I am Jose Chavez. That's at I am Jose Chavez on Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, Venmo. So, Venmo. Yeah. So if you want to go ahead and Venmo me some money, and then I'll say hi. No. No. But it's so just I don't know. I always tell people just try do something. If you're talking about doing something, just go out and do it. Whether or not you succeed at it, that's up to you. Or
with that, you kind of kick back my memory. Kicking back. Yeah. Okay, so cool. The whole question was like, in order, for the people who are kind of like looking for a way to kind of get into that comedy or just get started into something, like what's something that you felt like helped you and your personal experience to kind of jumpstart and take action on
that? Just do it. Honestly, here's what I'll say. When it came to starting comedy, it was kind of a fluke, but it's something that I really stuck with. I think the hardest part for doing something is just doing it the first time. Like you got the nerves, you have to build up the courage, start with something. Just it's like going in the deep end of the pool. You just got to do it. You can't, like, there's people who talk about being writers that have never written anything just because they're artistic. Like people refer to themselves as artists, but they've never created anything. They just kind of give themselves these labels. So if you want to go call yourself something, if there's something you want to do, just do the thing. It's not that hard. It's, if for some people it's finding an open mic. There's plenty of websites. If you Google comedy open mic near me, websites will come up and they'll recommend mics. Go out and do it. You're not going to succeed right away, and it'll be a long process. But if you want to try it, try it. It's just a matter of putting yourself out there and then just doing it in repetition. There's no formula to it. I'll say this, though. If you have a joke that you're working on and it's not getting a response, you got to either keep working on the joke or eventually you're just going to have to abandon it. Inside jokes don't always work, because it's like you think it's funny, and you have to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest with yourself and tell yourself when something isn't working. Like you have to be okay with being like, I'm not the greatest comic, or I'm not really a comic yet. I'm still figuring this shit out. If you are honest with yourself and you take your time to figure out what works and what doesn't work, you'll be good in no time. But it is a long practice. I mean, I've been doing this for almost 10 years, and I've been able to travel with it, which I'm thankful for. I've been able to get paid for it. I've been able to be a part of other people's podcasts or shows, and gotten a chance to work with some damn funny people. I've been in porno. Like, you know what? You're a little chubby and average sized penis, but that's exactly what we're looking for. And I said, perfect. Yeah, exactly.
That's what I search.
And the other guy was gentle. No, I'm
gonna look it up.
No, but so it's it's fun. It's like I wouldn't be here if I didn't accidentally do comedy once. I wouldn't be doing a lot of things if I didn't put myself out there. It's just like, just try it. It's honestly not that difficult. The dude that called, he's another podcaster.
Yeah, he hosts another podcast.
Yeah, good for him. It's like, and that's what you do. Just
Yeah, and he's a hip hop artist, right? Like a rapper. I don't know, trap artist.
Yeah,
one of those. But
what is a trap artist?
He makes some
like trapeze.
Those fix.
Like he just swings on top of ropes and shit.
No, it's like
he's like Home Alone. He sets traps and stuff. Like
gotcha.
Trap artist.
Yeah,
like don't ever leave that dude with ornaments. He will break them and fucking shatter them from your doors.
Oh man, that's funny. But there you go, Fix. That's the type of music you're playing. Man. But basically, I find it hard, not to talk to people like this. Again, I've always found myself a little difficult to approach people, like in a group, like you said, kind of like going into a ongoing conversation.
Yeah.
And for sure, I can't even think about talking or having a conversation into a fucking crowd. Yeah. Like just the thought of that, it's already getting me like.
Well, remember this: you're the focal point, and that's your benefit. You have the mic. You at that moment, you have the loudest voice in the room. Use it. If you can feel comfortable doing it right here in front of this mic, it's just like doing this. Yeah. Next time you do a podcast, do it with this. There's a mic right behind us. There's a little stage behind it. That's fucking beautiful. Yeah. You do something there. Just bring it out in front of your friends. Hell, when we finish this recording, I'll walk with you and you can do a quick open mic here in front of me, and it doesn't matter. It's not that difficult. Sometimes you got to do something that'll make you stand out, because if you close your eyes and you think of it, right now you are in a comedy room because people are listening to you. You don't have no idea how many people are out there, but they're listening to you. You're the focus right now, with the exception of when I'm talking. But saying is, when you're talking, you are the focus. People are listening in, and it's just you're just doing it live. You're doing it in front of people. So you have to have the faith that in that moment, their eyes are on you. All you have to do is just be funny. And it's not always super easy to just be funny, but if you have been able to make people laugh in the past and conversation and stuff like that, you can draw from your own personal conversations and figure out how to make that shit funny on stage.
Dude, that's perfect. And that's a perfect way to end this. Man, dude, well, thank you so much again for coming out. What time we have? We have 2 minutes here. Yeah. You start wrapping that up. Again, you gave us all your information earlier. Your website's awkwardlysocialcomedy.com. Do you mind giving us your Instagram or where they can reach you? If they want to book or anything, or
to book me and things like that, you can always email me, josechavezcomedian@gmail.com. If you want to reach out to me for just to see what kind of stuff I have going on, there's awkwardlysocialcomedy.com. My Instagram, Twitter, all of that is @IamJoseChavez. I also have @awkwardlysocialpodcast, but that's mostly for memes and to promote the show, to promote the podcast. But for more personal, direct kind of stuff is that. I don't know what else to really put out there, but cool. I want to say I have some stuff online. You probably won't find anything else out there for me right now.
Yeah, I saw some clips on YouTube.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the video clips. Those are just like I tried to put my podcast on video, but I don't have any. I was like, I'm gonna do something like this in the background, but I've been so lazy to do it. And then I tried to record with one comic, and she was like, you know what? I don't have my makeup on right now, so I was like, all right, fine. So,
Yeah.
And people don't want to just see my face. I'll be honest. There's nothing interesting going on here. I'm not saying I'm ugly or anything. I'm just saying I'm not. There's nothing interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I beg to differ, man.
Oh, thank you. I feel pretty now.
Well, thanks again, man. Thank you for coming out. Dre, as always, thank you for helping him out. Put up with the show.
Yeah, fucking Super Audio Network. Fucking check it out.
Man.
Support it. SuperAudioNetwork.com.
Yep.
Social Primates.
Yeah, we had a crossover. So this time, what is it? Awkwardly Social Primate. There you go. You know?
Oh, interesting.
Crossover.
I see that.
Ah.
I dig it.
Yeah, there you go. So,
I like that.
Again, thanks, man, for coming out.
For sure.
Everybody, thank you guys for tuning in. Check out the episode on YouTube on the Super Audio Network channel. If you want to listen to it, just Thursday will be available on iTunes, Stitcher, any of the cool spots for audio except Spotify. So
Gotcha.
I ain't there yet.
No,
But-
really?
Sorry.
That's cool. they don't
No,
let you-
I don't know. They kind of forgot my application, I guess.
They
I don't
didn't
know.
approve you?
I didn't even get a denial email, man. So I'm just
That's
just
rough.
waiting.
Like, sorry, we're going to approve you, but we fell asleep. Ooh.
Yeah, and they just lost it in the abyss. So I'll have to reapply. But
Resubmit, man. Just keep putting it out there till they finally approve. If I can knock some doors down, just keep doing it. You're not losing anything, but you know, if it happens, it happens. If not, then just keep doing this shit.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, well, Jose Chavez, thank you again, man. Everybody check out his podcast, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Cool. Bye.
Peace.